Hello, David Ansara here from the Centre for Risk Analysis, where we help you to understand risk in the present environment, to prepare for an uncertain future, and to prosper tomorrow. Are you looking to emigrate? If so, you may struggle to access your retirement savings. This is due to a new rule which is being proposed by National Treasury in draft legislation, which will limit your access to your retirement savings for a period of up to 3 years. I'm joined today by Joon Chong, who is a partner in the tax department at Webber Wentzel, a law firm. Joon, welcome to the CRA channel.
Hello, David. Thank you very much for having me.
So Joon, could you give us an overview of what some of the key provisions are in this legislation and how it might impact on people's ability to access their savings should they choose to immigrate?
Yes, so there are 5 different types of retirement funds. You have your pension fund, provident fund, which is provided as an employment benefit by your employer. And then you have your retirement annuity fund as well, which is an individual then contributes towards a REF, retirement annuity fund, towards their retirement. When individuals resign or they're retrenched from employment, they have the opportunity to transfer what is in the pension fund, what is in the employer's pension fund and provident fund to preservation funds. And preservation funds are very popular because they allow that transfer to go across to the preservation fund tax-free, and then what is then invested further on in the preservation fund will continue to be tax-free and enjoy the benefits of compounding. So any capital gains, any interest dividends of investments in the preservation funds will continue to be tax-free for the individuals. What the proposed amendment does is that it proposes to provide access to these funds, the preservation funds and the retirement annuity funds, to individuals only 3 years after they have ceased to be tax resident. Now, the current wording in the Income Tax Act provides for access of these amounts in the preservation funds and the REFs after completion of the financial emigration process. And that financial emigration process can take perhaps 6 months or a year. 6 months usually if it's not a complicated application. That means that individuals who have relocated from South Africa and they need access to their preservation funds or REFs, after 6 months of completion of this financial emigration process, they can then access what is in the preservation funds and REFs. I think what's important to note is the difference between the preservation funds and your REFs. Now, it is not only when an individual has completed the financial emigration process that they then have access to what's in the preservation funds. You have one pre-retirement access to the preservation funds, which you can then withdraw in full or partially. That means if you are looking to emigrate, if you're looking to relocate and you haven't completed financial emigration process and you haven't used up that one opportunity to withdraw in full or partially what is in the preservation funds, you can still do so. You don't have to financially emigrate to get access to full amounts in the preservation funds. That is what is different between the preservation funds and the REFs. The REFs, you can only access the full amounts in your REFs if you complete the financial emigration process. Therefore, there's a lot of panic, but if you've not used that one opportunity to withdraw amounts in your preservation funds, there's no need to panic. Once you relocate, or even before you relocate, you can do it now already. You can withdraw it, exercise your election for a full or partial withdrawal of what's in your preservation funds, and externalize the funds to invest offshore using your single discretionary 1 million or 10 million investment allowance and invest it offshore. So I suppose perhaps the negative impact of the amendment will be felt more strongly for those who invest in, for those who contribute to retirement annuity funds, because you can't have access to any amounts in your retirement annuity funds generally, as a general rule, unless you are normally, unless you have retired. So, and also on reaching the age of retirement, which is 55, you can only access 1/3 of it as a lump sum. 2/3 of it then has to be annuitized.
So, June, for many people, they will be considering emigrating, and obviously, immigration is a very costly endeavor for many people. They need to have access to their savings. Is there not a risk here that that could arbitrarily restrict the ability of people to move offshore and to have access to their assets?
The main concern here is whether or not people will start to perceive retirement annuity funds as a retirement alternative which is not as attractive as other forms of investments. I think there's a very real risk that will happen because if you are an individual who's just started working and your employer doesn't give you the benefit of contributing to an employer or to an employer pension or provident fund, will you then look towards investing in a retirement annuity fund? Possibly no, because you're a young South African. You've started working. You don't know how long you will be in South Africa. You don't know if you may have opportunities to work overseas, and you may want to relocate overseas if you have the opportunity. That means that if you contribute to a RAF, you will need to wait 3 years in terms of the current proposed amendment before you have access to your lump sums invested in RAFs. So yeah, the risks are retirement annuity funds will not be as attractive as potentially other forms of investments, unit trusts, bonds, because your access to retirement annuity funds will be severely restricted. You will have to wait 3 years upon ceasing to be tax resident, before you have access to full lump sums. It may well be that when you relocate, you need the funds in your lump sums to start afresh, buy a home in the new country. So the first risk is that retirement annuity funds are not going to be as attractive. The second risk is if you've been contemplating relocating and you're looking out at all these media articles to say, well, your access to retirement funds are now going to be severely restricted. You have preservation funds. You haven't used the one opportunity to withdraw, and you've been comfortable to wait until you absolutely need to, because you still believe firmly that you need to save for your retirement and enjoy the benefits of compounding. Now you potentially are thinking seriously of relocating because of what's happening economically in South Africa, and this may be the feather that breaks the camel's back, and you then say, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to take the leap of faith. I'm going to withdraw what's in the preservation funds in full. You're not even going to leave any behind because you don't know if the law is going to change as well. Because if you don't have the financial emigration process anymore, you have to wait 3 years after you cease being tax resident in terms of the current wording. So that is also potentially a risk that individuals will just say, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm looking at relocating. Let's just pay the tax now, withdraw in full, externalize the funds. The third risk is, of course, that there's a lot of media articles about the use of retirement funds in infrastructure investments in the country, which is very badly needed in order for meaningful economic recovery in South Africa. You may then think, well, you may completely lose trust in the institution of retirement funds and then just say, not invest at all, not contribute at all towards retirement funds, or contribute the absolute barest minimum required by your employer and then invest it elsewhere. Either externalize it, 1 million, 10 million, or invest it in equities on the JSE or unit trusts or index funds. So those are the three main risks.
So June, the third risk that you highlighted was around the prescribed assets debate. And there's a political backdrop to this, which is that the government's fiscal position has deteriorated dramatically. We're now looking at a over 700 billion rand deficit for this financial year, ballooning debt as a result. So government is desperate to fill that gap. And my reading of this, and I'd be curious to hear if you agree, is that basically this is a preemptive step in order to avoid capital flight in the event of some kind of prescription program being introduced. Do you think that that is a risk?
Thank you for that question, David. That's always an interesting question. National Treasury in the feedback meeting confirmed that that is not the intention at all. The intention is simply that financial emigration was the tax trigger for access to these funds. Financial emigration is no longer there. They needed to find an alternative tax trigger, which was ceased to be tax resident for 3 years. So that is what they've told us. I think there is some measure of truth. My personal view, I think it's difficult for me to say. I think that I think I would have to say it is not the direct intention of government to pass this legislation in order to try to hang on or hold on to retirement funds in South Africa. The reason why I say this is because you do have access to those funds. The lump sum withdrawal application process does allow for individuals to withdraw if they show a tax resident that they are tax resident in another country. And you can still withdraw lump sums once if you haven't used it. That's your pre-retirement full or partial lump sum withdrawal. The impact of the amendment is thus not as widespread as you would expect if government was seriously intending to hang on to individuals' retirement funds. So for that reason, I would say no, but it is a cautious no.
June, thank you very much for sharing your insights and analysis with us. We'll put a link in the description below to a recent op-ed that you wrote on this subject, as well as your contact details. That's it from me, David Ansara. Please do remember to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and also check out our 30-day free trial. Link is also in the description. Take care.
Thank you very much, David.